So I think David was going to start first, so I'll just turn it over to you, and you guys take it away.
So I'll kind of lay the groundwork with the biological and cognitive aspects of dreaming, which for me has been important to appreciate their spiritual importance. So for decades, it's been known that everyone dreams every night, as do most mammals. All right. The dreams are integral to the sleep process. There are different kinds of dreams. There's REM dreams, hypnagogic, half awake, half asleep dreams, and other kinds. Nobody knows why we don't all remember more dreams than we do, but the only way to stop somebody from dreaming is to wake them up when REM sleep starts with the right brain waves. And when you do that, folks who say they never remember the dreams will remember. So probably the most widely believed theory amongst sort of hard-nosed scientists is the notion that dreams are a random byproduct of nighttime brain maintenance function, and our mind does the best it can to organize the images in some kind of coherent form. So dreams, for those researchers, dreams have storylines for that reason. Those of us who think that dreams do have a spiritual aspect, we tend to fall into two camps. Folks out of mainstream psychology who believe in the unconscious mind often think that dreams only go back to birth. But others of us believe that there's a subconscious separate from a deeper unconscious. It goes all the way down the animal tree to the amoeba, even. That's where you get into Jungian notions of collective universal archetypes and the collective unconscious. He gave us the vocabulary to understand dreams with and to relate them to higher reality in a systematic way. So he's important. And most modern dream workers have built their approach and theories on his foundations. While some of us think that dreams have access to information only since birth, others of us think that they can go back to pre-birth and pre-lifetime, past lifetime experiences. Jeremy Taylor, who passed away a few years ago, was an eminent dream worker. He took the writings of more famous people like Carl Jung and Fritz Perls and so forth and synthesized them into a number of basic theories which have more or less pervaded the field. And they're worth ticking off. One is the notion that all dreams come in the service of health and wholeness, which is the most controversial of his ideas. Some of it could be psychotic. Two, there's no such thing as a dream with only one meaning, because people's levels of interest in their dreams differ. Three, every dream comes for a reason. Every dream comes to tell you something new. It's not just going to tell you stuff that you already know. And the most important touchstone of dream work is an actual aha or tingle test feeling in the body, not just in the head. And so I like to say that dreams have an intellectual message and a deeper felt emotional message. You know you're on the right track in terms of feeling the meaning of the dream when you can feel it as well as just think about it. His sixth and final principle is the idea that dreams express themselves in the universal language of metaphor and symbol, which is deeper than normal language or culture. So the best way to understand this is to imagine what some thinkers call the basic world. So we all take in the same basic sense data in a general sense, whether we're young, old, literate, illiterate, 12, from wherever in the world. We all know what clothing is, what clouds are, what parents are, what sex is, what the ground is. That's the basic world. Doesn't depend on literacy or intelligence. So dreams work with that material to formulate their imagery. In that sense, they do have a universal language. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to approach dreams a little differently. I'm going to look at different types of dreams. And there's 5 basic types. The first one being a future event dream. And this is done it's witnessed during your dream state, but it's done in color and it's done in sequence. So you go to sleep and you dream about your best friend who lives out in California getting a job that she's been so anxious about. And you wake up and maybe the phone rings 2 days later and you find out your friend did get that job that she's wanted. So it is a future event thing. Sometimes they're within your realm, sometimes they're more worldwide events, but many people have these future event dreams. So that's one of the types that we have. Another, which is probably the most unsettling, is called a release dream. These are the ones that can get very chaotic, nightmarish. They have a lot of symbolism with them. Your subconscious is trying to release things. The ones where you're being chased by something or someone, where there's a reoccurrence of different things over and over again. You are trying to work through things. And so these release dreams are, as I said, very chaotic and very not uniformal. They're hard to kind of put together. And if you sit back and can remember them, they seem very sporadic. The third kind is a wish dream, and it's exactly what it says. You wish for that red sports car that you never had and you want to drive, and in your dream you're driving that red sports car as fast as you want to go. And so wish dreams are just that. They fulfill wishes, sometimes materialistic, sometimes emotional, but they fulfill those wishes inside of you. The fourth kind is called an information or problem solving. You go to bed with a very heavy problem on your heart, and you don't have an answer for it. You don't know what to do with it. And when you wake up, you've got that aha moment. Oh, there's the answer. Now I know what to do. Now I know how to proceed. That information is given to you in two ways. One, it's telepathically, which can come from any source. It can come from a place. It can come from an animal. It can come from another spirit. It can come anywhere. Any place that has energy, it can come to you from. So that's telepathically. The other way is that you travel. You astral travel at least 3 to 4 times a week. We don't sleep because our body needs to rest. We sleep because our soul needs to get out of this body, which is very confining. So 3 to 4 times a week, you're out traveling around, whether you know it or not. And so many times you go different places, or you go to a source where you need to get to find the information for that problem that you're concerned about. And when you wake up, you have that answer already for you. The last one is called astral visits, and that's a visitation from a loved one who has passed on. And sometimes they come to visit you, or sometimes you go visit them. But it's a very real dream. It really does happen, and it's usually something that is remembered in great detail. It's not just a passing dream which you forget almost instantly. It stays with you because it is a real visit. And so those are very powerful, and I'll talk about mine a little later on. The other two things I wanted to add in, sleep paralysis. Some people feel like as they're waking up that they can't move, they're paralyzed almost. If you just relax, you've been out traveling and you're coming back into body, and you just haven't quite synced up yet. And so for a couple of seconds or a minute or so, you are almost like paralyzed because you can't move. It's really just coming back into your body again. And so if you give yourself a chance to relax, you'll just sink back up again, and it won't be a problem. The last one is called remote viewing, and some people do that where you go out to a specific place, and you're looking for a very specific item, or you go into somebody's home and you could actually read a book that's on the table. You actually have that much detail given to you, where you are actually picking up and almost reading through a book. That's called remote viewing. And that's a little different kind of a dream, but it's also something that, we can do while we dream. So now I'll turn it over to Max.
Fascinating, isn't it? So it falls to me to talk about dream interpretation. I use 2 systems to interpret my dreams. The first one is very easy. It's called fleeing a dream, F-L-E-A. So it works with a whole dream, with a fragment of a dream, with a single image, or even if you just wake up and you sort of have a feeling that you've had a dream, you can flee that, any one of those. So I have cards, by the way, that are going to be on the table here that outline what I'm about to say. The F in flee is feeling. So the question is, what was the feeling state of the dream? And allow yourself to re-experience the feeling of the dream. The L is like life. So what in your life, your waking life, is like what happened in the dream? So just noticing the parallels, that's a way of kind of interpreting the hidden messages just by connecting it to what is like the dream in your life. The E is the ending. If you didn't have an ending, then what ending would you give to the dream? If you did have an ending, but you didn't like it, how would you change the ending of the dream? That's the E. And the A is action. What action would you take as a result of knowing what you now know about the dream? It's very easy to flee a dream. So if somebody's disturbed, they've had a dream, and you don't want to go into a big, long, symbolic kind of thing, just flee the dream. And it's amazing how much value people get out of that. The other kind of dream interpretation that I do, and I'm going to give an example of that in the next round, I took a class many years ago in Anne Faraday's The Dream Game. This is a much more committed version of dream interpretation. That Anne's process essentially is you keep a tape recorder by the side of your bed, and you teach yourself to wake up when you realize that you're having a dream. And you record the dream into, in those days it was a cassette recorder, but now it would be your phone, I guess. The next morning, you take a journal, which is a dedicated dream journal, and you transcribe the dream. So you play the tape back and you write down exactly what the dream said. And you do that every day. Now, there are people who say they don't dream or they don't remember their dreams. If you do this process, because I took this class, I didn't really remember my dreams either. If you do this process, you wake up in the morning, you see that the tape recorder and the journal are sitting there. Within a few days, you'll start remembering fragments, and within a week, you'll have a lot of work to do in the morning transcribing your dreams. I did this class for 8 weeks. So the interesting part of her process is that once you've got the dream transcribed, you read through it for images that seem interesting or powerful to you. And what she says is, no matter how hard it is to believe, you have experienced that image sometime in the last 24 hours. So you might say to yourself, I don't know, I dreamt about a giraffe. How did I see a giraffe? And when you're doing the system for a while, you realize, I was actually sitting in the dentist chair. And I was reading through that Highlights for Children, and I saw a drawing of a giraffe. And I thought to myself, geez, I wish I was out there in Africa and not here. I wish I was any place but here. I wish I could get out of here. And what she says is, the giraffe in the dream is not a giraffe. It's a variable place, a placeholder for the feeling you had when you were experiencing that image. So what you would write in there is, I wish I could get out of here. And when you go through each of the images in the dream, and you just look, you only have to look back 24 hours, and find, some of them are really amazingly hidden in your unconscious, find where it was that you experienced that, and cross out the word and write in a little phrase that describes the feeling state or the meaning that that image had. When you read it back, you get a very ungrammatical and unbelievably clearly interpreted message from the unconscious. And essentially what her system says is that there's a being inside of us, a sub-personality, that she calls the dreamer. And you need to have a relationship with that dreamer. So the reason that you're not remembering your dreams is the same reason some of you aren't talking to your spouses, because they're not listening to you, and so you just give up on having communication. But if you start the communication and you show with your commitment that every night you're recording your dreams and every morning you're writing them out and transcribing them, your dreamer starts to go, oh, you're actually interested in these messages. And they become less and less coded. And they go deeper and deeper into first the unconscious, and then, like David said, maybe into past lives or things that you have no idea about, but that are clearly meant specifically and directly for you in this particular moment, which is one of the amazing things about dreams. They're your dreams, right? They're not just generic. And so they were designed by whatever your belief system is about who does the designing of the way things play out. But it was clearly designed specifically for you and in that particular moment of your life. And so these are wonderful messages of great value and intimacy, specifically for you, from subconscious or spirit. Very powerful information, and we have numbers of them every night, as David said, everyone does, and we leave these powerful personal messages in bed as we get up and start our busy day. And this was an amazing experience for me of discovering the power of that, to the point of being totally freaked out by how powerful they actually are. And we'll talk about that next round. Yes, it's called The Dream Game by Anne Faraday. I'll have it up here for people who want to take a look at it. I just got it off of Amazon.
So what we'll all do now is spend about 10 or 15 minutes to start describing our experiences in more detail. To make sense of my experiences, I need to give you sort of a rough spiritual history as I go. It's not really possible to separate the dreams from the spirituality. I guess my mystical spirituality started when I was 16 in prep school. I ran into a book called The Pocket Guide of the Supernatural. And I taught myself briefly astral projection, or AP as we know it in the field. And I had some of the classic experiences. I looked down on my body, saw the silver cord connecting my astral body to my physical body. All those are common experiences. Other than that, my dream life was pretty normal up until my late 20s. 8 years of TM out of college, transcendental meditation. No dreams connected with that. And so at age 27, I found myself kind of lost. Started checking out spiritual groups, and I ran into a book about pranayama, Hindu breathing techniques. And I immediately began doing advanced levels of that, which you should never do. Do not ever do that, believe me. So I began having Kundalini awakening experiences, which is another story I can't go into. But I guess in connection with that, the dream life kind of took off. I began having very spectacular, fantasy kinds of dreams, like pink and yellow dinosaurs dancing in the fifth dimensions or something. I never took acid, but it was like, So the major event at age 29, which really, when I got initiation into a large Hindu-related spiritual group with a living guru, and that blasted me wide open. The dreams immediately began speaking up with messages. And I didn't have a choice about being interested in them. That's just the form that my spirituality took. I knew I'd better pay attention and start journaling. And that was in 1983. The first thing that happened was an extraordinary spell of really high dimension, beautiful vista dreams, and of a kind I'd never experienced. In a few of them, the guru's guru, this well-known deceased Indian saint, sort of tossed me up into these higher realms. And I was reading his material. I met a creature from something out of the Lord of the Rings, from another planet. Who knows where he was from? He called himself Ergapi or something. And so, I understood these experiences to be about education and exposure. This guy's books were saying these things exist, and he's saying to me through all these experiences, see, I'm not making this up. This stuff is real. So any doubt I had about God or about higher reality or whatever was just completely blown out the window with that. That lasted a couple of months, but it was sure important. So the next phase was I started getting a lot of inner guidance through benevolent voices, what I call audio dreams. Sometimes associated with visual dreams, sometimes not. For about a 3 or 4 year period, I went through a pretty difficult kind of growing up phase of dealing with life issues, relationships, jobs, financial decisions, going to school, doing well in school or not. All that was, I was often very disorganized and needed a lot of guidance, and that guidance was forthcoming big time. These were hypnagogic events mostly, half awake, half asleep, dreams. And at the time I was so arrogant that I wouldn't have accepted anything, people telling me stuff from the outside. The one thing all these messages have in common, I think, is I wouldn't have done them if people had told me externally. So they were important for my, health and well-being. the great self, as I like to call it, didn't want me making too many mistakes. And I'm paraphrasing most of these, but they're real enough. Stay away from that person. Don't eat that. No sugar, no caffeine, never for you. Just like some healers externally had been telling me, which I could not apply the discipline to do until then. Have more manners. Keep that to yourself. Don't write that article impugning your teacher, which would have got published in Yoga Journal and created some bad karma. One of them said, a good customer always pays. I went back through my disorganized piles and I found a 3-month-old medical bill. This was amazing. I experienced a lot of gratitude in connection with it because part of me realized how stupid I was being externally in my life at the time. Sometimes it was the guru's voice. Sometimes it was the voice of a friend who was connected in some way with the issue being addressed. What I like to call my single most important dream was one of these. Some of you have heard this. I was thinking of getting involved with a certain woman. This was about 30 years ago. Had my reservations about her, but I'll give her a call tomorrow. That night, audio dream. 2 seconds long, 2 voices. A baby squalling and that woman nagging. Boom. Forget her. Forget her. Who knows how my life would have turned out. Probably not in the best way had I not heeded that dream. So nothing spiritual or romantic, but really concrete. So when my overall situation improved, I grew up a little bit and began exercising more discrimination about everything in my life. These audio dreams stopped completely. Haven't had one in decades. And there are other kinds of dreams I can talk about briefly. And all this is about dialogue between myself and Source. You can do your meditation, your journaling, go to your yoga center, whatever you do for your spirituality, then that's how you keep that dialogue going. So single vision dreams would be another category of, these are dreams that help me make decisions. It's either A or B. No subtleties in between. Some of the important ones were where to go to grad school. Got into Temple, got into George Washington University, could not figure out where to go. So I'm hemming and hawing on this question. Boom, big dream. The skyline of the Temple University campus in North Philly. Decision. So who to marry? It's taken me a long time to realize marriage would be good for me. So when I finally did, I was so confused about that issue. When you get older, falling in love, in my experience, when you're older, more experienced, it gets to be a more subtle experience, So my wife and I met, we had big reservations about each other for quite a while. I couldn't figure out to ask her or not. So again, boom, dream, single vision. She's sitting on a sofa, beaming at me with love, and I feel bliss in here. Decision. Now, a normal person could have made these decisions on his own. I couldn't. So, it was very helpful. And so it's often confusing because you start having these experiences and then you kind of start relying on them. You want to be able to consult them. They would not be consulted. So a question I often have, and some of you probably also have relationships with inner guidance, you may have this question as well. When do I decide things on my own, and when do I wait for this faculty to speak up for me? Continues to be a confusing question for me sometimes. And these dreams always find a way of happening when you absolutely least expect it, even if your mind's been dwelling on the question. In some cases it does speak up right away when you're really in trouble, in my experience, but for the most part it's totally unexpected, which is what gives me confidence that these things are from Source. Because if I could predict them, then it's not comes from something totally transcendent, even though in touch with the earth, So in connection with that, and of course, so another, what I call the non-participatory teaching dream, you're just shown something, So one of them involved, this was about 4 or 5 months ago, My wife and I were visiting family down in Virginia. We had an argument. I don't remember what it was about, but it got pretty heated. Unresolved, went to bed, and boom. She's standing in the room, gesticulating, talking, we're arguing. She's sitting there talking away. She has no head. Then I see her head in her heart, and I realize she speaks her feelings directly with no filter. So she'll say unreasonable and crazy things, and I needed to remember that. Go easy. Don't argue too hard, because she just needs to express her feelings directly and make no sense if necessary. So that was a reminder to, keep things in order with your relationship. So, this has happened innumerable times over the years. And I'll share one final example, which is a little bit more detailed. I've been sort of semi-retired from adjunct professor teaching for about 5 years. About 2 years ago, I managed to write these things, but otherwise, some things that I wanted to do weren't really panning out, so I decided to get more involved in some more volunteer work than I had already been doing. So, when you do that, you have to train, then you make a 1-year commitment and so forth. It's a big time commitment and so on. So I began making arrangements to do something with literacy somewhere, and then, boom. Fairly complex dream, but it ended up with Michael Smerconish, of all people, a semi-centrist conservative columnist and radio host. He's a king, dressed like a little troubadour king, really dignified, comical, but a lot of authority about him. He's in this little carriage being drawn by these tiny horses. Troubadour king. He says to me, "Don't do so much charity." Whammo. Whoops. So apparently, although it's not always comfortable, there are projects I'm working on my own. I spend all my time working on them. That's not always comfortable, but it's what I need to be doing. Not any more charity than I have been doing before. So those examples are fairly short and sweet. Really more complex dreams, like Max said, can be difficult to unpack and really go into. So I managed to write this, $2 if you don't want to spend $20 on a big dream book somewhere. And this is a textbook about more mystical spirituality in general, if that's of interest. So, thank you.
What I'd like to share is a couple different dreams that I've had. I've had many over the years that I've remembered. Being a mystic and a psychic and stuff, I've had many different ways of connecting with spirit, and mostly they do it when I'm awake. So dreaming is not my first level as far as connecting with spirit. But having a visit from my dad after he passed was definitely a first. It was about 6 months after he had passed. And my first recollection was he was wearing a Navy business suit, but he was a salesman. So he came to me in something that I would recognize as being recognizing him. And at the time, I didn't think about it, but I'm thinking, his hair is dark again. It's not gray. And he's thinner than he used to be and stuff. So when he passed, he had graying hair and he had put on a little pounds and stuff. So he looked back the age we all are back in heaven, which is 30, which is wonderful to think about. We all get to go back to, with the very dark hair and the slimmer build. And we had a wonderful night together. We spent it up in heaven. We sat by a creek and talked for a very long time, and I can remember going into a big building made of stone, which had huge windows all the way down almost to the floor, and meeting all kinds of different spirits that he knew. I was being introduced to all kinds of different spirits. It was a wonderful night to spend. It was our time to reconnect. So when I say, when you have a visitation like that, it's not something you ever forget. It's just like going over and meeting somebody or going on a vacation. You don't forget the details. You don't forget it. So even all these years later, it's still very clear that I did visit with him and we had that time together. I'll share another different kind of dream with him that I had. A couple years later, my dad loved to sail, and so when we would go to the shore for the summer, he always had at least one or two sailboats, and so this is now after he had passed, and we had taken the little dinghy down, which was we could make into a sailboat. And so at 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm getting this, although he's not there, but I'm getting awakened, and he said, "Cyn, there's a storm out there, and the dinghy's over, and the mast is getting pushed into the sand. You've got to go out and right it." And I'm like, I'm not awake. I'm like, what in the heavens? So I'm like trying to come out of sleep, and he's going, "Cyn, go out there. The dinghy's over. I don't want the mast busted. Go out and right the dinghy." This is at 4 in the morning. It's dark out, and it's raining, and it's stormy. So I wake up, and I go out, and I can't see anything when I'm looking out the window. We had a place right on the bay, and I'm looking out. I can't even see if the dinghy's right side up or upside down. So I wait about an hour, and it starts to lighten up a little bit. So I wake up my husband, who is really thrilled at this. And I said, "Bob, we got to go out and right the dinghy." He goes, "We got to do what?" And he said, "It's raining. It's miserable out there." I said, "We got to go out and right the dinghy." So we did. We trudged throughout in the bay at 4 in the morning or 5 in the morning. It's raining. It's lightning. It's miserable. The dinghy was over. The mast was getting pushed into the sand. He didn't want his dinghy hurt, so we righted the dinghy. So he does come back from time to time in different things and check in, as others do. But don't be afraid with the visitation dreams. They're real. They really do happen. So I'll turn it over to Max.
Thank you. So I was telling you about the class that I took in the dream game. So it was an 8-week class, and in the last class, the teacher taught us the advanced skill in the book, which is called incubating a dream. So the idea behind this is you can ask for a dream to give you the answer to a question that your conscious mind can't solve. Sounded great to me. So the technology, according to my class, was you sit in bed with your tape recorder next to you, and in your dream journal for 45 minutes, you write the question. I was single back then and really curious about love, and so my question was, what's the nature of love? And then you write for 45 minutes everything that you can think of about that topic. And then you put the dream journal down next to your tape recorder and you go to sleep. And in the middle of the night, as had been my want for that whole 8 weeks, I realize I'm getting to the end of a dream. I wake myself up and I reach over to the tape recorder and I see the journal there. And I realize, oh, this was the dream that I asked for. And so I record it in very great detail and go back to sleep. And the next morning, I take my cup of coffee and my dream journal and my tape recorder and I start transcribing the dream. And it's a dream about a woman named Jennifer, who 10 years earlier I had had like a 3 or 4 week very intense relationship with, and I hadn't spoken to her or heard of her in 10 years. And so as I'm told to do, I start the tape recorder, I start transcribing, and the dream is about Jennifer. And I realized about a third of the way into the dream that this dream isn't about Jennifer. I was dating a woman named Tirsa. And that the stuff that I was writing was exactly about what was going on in my relationship with her. And so the next time the tape recorder says, Jennifer, I write the word Tirsa, and the phone rings. And it's Tirsa. And she's got questions about our relationship, and the answers are written down in front of me.
Wow.
And so I essentially read them off to her, and we have this amazing connection. And I'm tempted to put the whole thing down and go, wow, that was wild. But the commitment is very important here, because remember, this isn't just about dreams. This is about me and my dreamer. This is a commitment about this relationship. And the commitment is that you're going to go to the end of every dream. So I start the tape recorder back up again, and I'm transcribing, and every time the tape recorder says, Jennifer, I write Tirsa. And it goes on for another third of the dream. And then towards the end of the dream, where I had sensed there was some powerful imagery, I realized that it's shifted. It's not about Tirsa anymore, because Tirsa didn't have kids, and Jennifer in the dream has kids. and the real Jennifer did. And so the next time the tape says Jennifer, I write Jennifer. And the phone rings. And it's Jennifer. She lives 3,000 miles away. And I haven't seen her in 10 years. And she says to me, "My dear, what have you been up to? I have been awake all night long thinking about you." Now, I'm excited about the idea that you can ask your dreamer and get answers to questions you don't know the answers to. And I'm even excited about the specificity of the answers. It gets a little hinky when the phone rings and your local girlfriend is asking you the questions that you've just written down, but I'm willing to go that far. But the second time the phone rang, that was like this is kind of what David was saying. This goes way beyond the idea that this is my unconscious or this is that I've somehow dreamed this up. I didn't dream that up because I didn't even have any idea that anything like that was even remotely possible. And it scared me and gave me a sense, on the one hand, of how innocent we are. You know, we're walking around with our little egos and our little conscious minds, and we think we know so much. And, meanwhile, mountain ranges islands are being created, worlds are being created. Who's doing all of that? And so what that dream did in some ways showed me, I guess sort of like, this was in Boulder, right near the Rockies. It was like the Rockies. In some ways, it makes you feel very insignificant, the size of them. And in another way, it makes you feel grand because you're connected to something that is so beautiful and so big. And that's the potential of dreams. I was realizing while I was practicing for today's talk that I recently published a book. I'm a marriage mediator now, and I published a book, and I spent 7 years writing it. And I got it all done, and there were two things right about publishing. I was just basically waiting for two pieces of information before I published it. One was the title, and the other was the cover, the picture. And I realized that when I was doing this work, and I was learning about Anne Faraday's idea that in the last 24 hours, that's where your images come from. And in one of my first dreams, I dreamed about these two horses that didn't like each other. And I was thinking, now where in the last 24 hours have I seen two horses that didn't like each other? And then I remembered that I had taken a ride the day before, and Boulder is a little town, and there's prairie land outside of it, and there are horse fields out there. And I remember seeing the fields are huge out there because the grass is kind of sparse. And there were these two horses in this monster field, went as far as the eye could see. And they were standing head to toe. Their heads were facing opposite. They were right next to each other in this big field, and they were facing opposite directions. I remember having the thought, well, if you don't like each other, why are you standing next to each other in this whole field? And so when I realized that when it finally came time to come up with an image for the book, the image that I came up with was two people facing away from each other because I do conflict resolution. And the actual picture that ended up with them facing each other fighting. But that was really where it came from. And the name Loving Conflict also came in the same dream that I had, remembering those two horses. That why would they be so close to each other? It was because they loved each other. But why weren't they facing the same direction? It was because they were in conflict. So this book is available over here. I have it in audio and also in paperback. And also cards that have information on how you can get my books, and also information about how you can flee a dream on the cards that are over there.
Okay, thank you. What we're going to do now is a little bit of sharing. I want us to, and I have some questions that I want you to share. Let's everyone make groups of about 4 or 5 people. So let's turn our chairs. You don't have to move them back where they were, but just face them back forward for a few minutes. Does anyone have, any of the groups have maybe one dream that stood out enough they wanted to share it? Now, okay, yeah, let me give you the mic. Maybe, yeah, George, you and Ken can help me pass around the mic, too.
Okay, testing. Okay, I was following a guru from India who we would meet in an ashram in West Philadelphia. He was 15 years old, and then I met my soon-to-be wife, who I had heard was a so-called Jesus freak. I had a dream of the guru being in a hot air balloon going up and up and up. And he went into this stratosphere and was gone forever. And then I got together with my person who became my wife. We went to a Presbyterian church, got married by a Methodist minister who was her sister. So it was, that dream was telling me to give up one spiritual avenue and hook up into another one. So that was cool.
Any others? Everybody's back. Well, if that's the case, I'm sure you got a lot about this from the sharing you did. Let's do this. Let's just focus back to our panel with the wonderful stories they told and see if you have questions or things you would like to discuss with them. So we'll open it back up to the panel, and if you would use the mic when you have questions or comments or things you want to direct with them. Sandra, just a second.
Yeah, I just have a question, because sometimes I have different animals in my dreams. So what, and then I go into the computer and see, what that animal represents. But what do animals really signify in dreams?
They generally, they're associated with instincts, human qualities that sort of basic emotional instinctual qualities. We associate them with sort of messenger spirituality functions. We've all vaguely heard about indigenous tribes with their animal allies and animal spirits. Yeah, that would be, and of course your particular association with animals in terms of what Max was saying. And that would be.
Any other panelists have ideas about animals showing up in your dreams?
Are they one type specifically, or are they different types?
They're different animals.
Okay.
I had a dream of fox with a snake, and I'm not really quite sure.
One thing you might do is look up animal totems, and it'll give you some information about this specific animal. Sometimes that clues you in, too, as far as how it relates.
What was that word, totem?
Animal totems.
Totem.
Yeah.
It's
Well, I'm
interesting.
thinking, Max, you talked about it could be the past 24 hours. Remember the story of the giraffe? You might have seen something.
Yeah, so it's likely that you saw something that had an image of that animal. You had a thought or a feeling at that moment, and that's what that means, which is why in Anne Faraday's system, the identical dream can mean completely different things, depending upon what your experience was right before. The other thought I have is I spend winters in Bali, and they have an animism form of religion, and they believe in evolution, but they believe that each one of us have evolved through all of the layers of evolution. And so if someone has what we would call anxiety, they would say, so that's your squirrel energy. And so you've evolved back to the squirrel stage, and so let's see what it is that the squirrel is needing in order to evolve you back up to being a human. And so instead of seeing it as a problem or having the diagnosis of anxiety, it's one of the pieces of us that have value and that show up when that's the energy that we're needing in our lives at that time.
Great. Okay, other questions? Okay. I saw Kyle first.
Is there like a time limit on dreams? I had a dream 20 years ago that felt huge. And I feel like, could I get the message now? With my new current interpretation of that? Mm-hmm. Not too late?
Not too late.
Okay.
Never. No statute of limitations. No.
I mean, when you do dream work, ideally, you do want to work with recent dreams, but dreams as far back as you can remember, it's amazing how they have resonance into the future.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
memories, dreams, and reflections. Jung had a dream when he was 3 about a tower, and in his 60s and 70s he built it because he needed to go into it to get the depth of its value. So if it's present for you now, the feelings of it, the images of it, then now is the time. It's like, it's like reading the same book 10 years later. It's not the same book.
Because you're 10 years older, so you look at it differently. Same thing.
Thank you. I just wanted to know the difference between dreaming in bright light and darkness. I have dreams in both. Where everything is bright and sunny, and then some dreams are very dark. So
That would be, light, dark, good, evil. That aspect of it is misleading. But generally, the darkness, subconscious, deep stuff you don't want to look at, obscure things which you barely remember, bedrock memories, covered over with conditioning, light, knowledge, joy, vividness, clarity. That would be the general, that's common sense, or sort of symbols and so forth.
In Faraday's system, she says that your dreamer is always sending you messages. And if the message is not that important, it'll just sort of whisper it, and you'll experience the feelings as light and easygoing. As the message becomes more and more important and urgent, it becomes less and less coded, and the images become scarier and scarier until finally the unconscious basically wakes you up in order to literally wake you up to the message.
Yeah, so nightmares are generally thought to be the most important kind of dream and the most auspicious if you're willing to look at what they're trying to mention, trying to say.
Hello, everyone. This is an exciting subject for me, but especially Cyndi, with the visitation dreams. Mm-hmm. You really resonate with that, and you and I have had conversations about that. And when my mother dropped dead suddenly about 15 years ago, I was out of the country, and I didn't fly home to see her. But ironically, I'm the one in the family we all come from the Irish Catholic background, and my grandmother has always been visitations for me. I have visitations of her all the time. She was a very conflicted person with a lot of physical problems, and a lot of challenges with her body image. And therefore, when I have dreams of her, I never have a physical image of her at all. I have her in her pure perfection. And she's ageless. And I also find I'm able to help the family resolve conflict about her with her mistakes that she made in parenting and with all of her mental problems that she had. And I find a way to have healing with my siblings because I see her in her perfection when she was a child from all the dysfunction in her family. So therefore, I think I'm a vehicle for her now. And in fact, I just saw her again the other night, and I said to my brother, "Oh, Mom looks fantastic. She's doing really well." And I think I help them now because sometimes they go into a negative state about, well, Mom did this and Mom did that, And I feel like I'm this goodwill ambassador for her now and able to bring that back to the family with the healing. And I think she's asking me to do that. And I'm sharing some sad stories about her past that I think I'm the only one that knew some of those stories. So in a way, she's never going to leave. And I don't believe any of her parents are ever gone from us because they're in our whole physical being. So that's cool about your dad in that boat. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, they do come back to tell us stories, to tell us things, to, give us information and to help us here. They really do want to help us. So when you're helping your brothers and sisters and stuff, it's wonderful that you can take that information and take it forward to help others. Because that's really what they want to do. They want to let us know that they're okay and they're doing fine. And they would like us to be able to move on and put some things behind us if they've done harm especially.
One of the wonderful things about the dream world and the world of spirit is that the limitations, it's delicious being incarnate, but there are limitations of time and space. And in the dream world and in the spirit world, those limitations are lifted.
Yeah.
And it's nice to experience that in relationship or even experience it yourself for a little bit as you go on a journey.
And probably one of the most general mystical insights from the sages, they tell us that this is only the primary dream in the mind of God. And those of us with the International Association for the Study of Dreams, we get together, all scientists, academics, therapists, artists. Most of us think that this is secondary. The dream world is primary. That this is the greater reality. And I wanted to mention also, before I forget, dreams have some methods don't interpret at all. It's all just eliciting feelings in therapeutic situations. That's more expensive, but it's probably the most powerful way to do dream work. You do interpretation, you begin to get, again, you feel it in your body when intellectually you start to get on the right track. But it is possible for someone who's really good at it to just go right for the solidified emotional issues that dream objects represent. They're there to help us grow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there are Aboriginal cultures around Australia who believe exactly what you said, that the dream world is the real world.
Yeah.
And what happens, what we call during the day, is kind of just secondary to
not
that.
real.
Other questions? Yeah.
I had read several years ago an author, I think her name was Rosalind Cartwright, who is also a dream analyst, I guess. And her theory was that the dream that we remember, the one that we are awakened from, or the last one that we had, is the last one. That there were, and I think one of you had mentioned it, that there are several periods of REM sleep during the night, and that if someone were to awaken us during each of those REM periods, the dream that we awakened from, the last dream that we had, would be clearer to us if we knew the ones that preceded it. And I was wondering whether or not you have had experience with this or believe that.
Now, I've never had understood or heard about the idea that your dreams previous are the ones that clarify the last one. The last period of REM sleep at night is the longest. That's the one that the most detailed and powerful dreams tend to take place in. Yeah.
I will say that when I was doing the class and remembering all of my dreams, they do tend to link together in content. The other thing I want to say is that when we're asleep, we lack the chemical of memory, the scientists have found. And so if you wake up with the sense that you've had a dream, but not clear memory of the dream, it's important not to move your head. Because if you move your head, it kind of washes your brain and clears out the hormones and the images go away. And so if you just lay still, the images may come back. And as I said, the better your relationship with your dreamer, the more powerful and clear that the dreams keep coming. But that's a powerful tool to just lay still for just a minute or so.
Yeah, that reminds me of something. I realize that when I wake up and my dream I realize it's disappearing. If I cover my eyes, like with my hands, It helps me. It helps me remember, and it's so like it's just something I realized recently, and it's really powerful. Like it helps a lot. So I just thought I'd kind of throw that out there. Reminded me of what you were.
One of the ideas that we notice helps people remember is to assume the series of body positions you had during sleep over the course of the night, because dreams are a function of the mind-body complex in some so your actual proprioception, the position that you had while you were sleeping can help you remember the dream. For me, what helps you wake up with a dream, I don't want to get up, disturb my wife, and turn the light on. Just rehearse it 8 or 9 times in your head to imprint it into longer-term memory, and it'll be with you in the morning.
And most of the dreams I do, there's early morning dreams. If I stay with it, as you said, to repeat it over, if you just stay quiet and still and kind of repeat it in your head, and then get up and perhaps write it down at that time. But those are the most powerful ones that I usually remember. Early in the mornings, there's the last REM. So they usually stick with you.
Other questions? I'm curious if anyone has had dreams that aren't mentioned here. I've talked to people who have dreams like somebody's chasing them, these sorts of things. Mm-hmm. So has anyone here had dreams that have not been discussed that you might want to throw out to the panel to see what response they might have?
Common psychology dreams are great to talk about. Being chased being about the most common. So everybody's had dreams of being undressed in public and things like that. So, questions?
Go back to school. You go back.
Yeah, Patricia, just a minute.
They're scary times.
This isn't really a question so much as a comment that when I was in seminary, I took a class with Jeremy Taylor. And I remember, so he had worked for decades with doing dream work in groups, and he has a whole method that he uses for doing dream work in groups. And he himself had been part of a dream group for a very long time. This is in the Bay Area. And they had become so accustomed to sharing their dream lives with each other that they could plan to meet in their dreams. And they would all have a similar dream. They met in their dream life. And so and also sometimes we have dreams on behalf of other people. So we tend to think very individualistically in our culture, but there's also this collective aspect to dreams. And I would be very curious. I don't know if anybody's compiling right now dreams that people are having given the state of the world. I'm sure that a lot of people are having dreams about what's going on. So there's this collective and the communal aspect of dreams as well.
Yeah. You can actually program yourself to have dreams with somebody else. You can actually arrange a time and place to meet. You can actually reprogram endings to dreams, especially if someone's chasing you or something's chasing you. Change it into a pink bunny or something. You can change that before you go to bed. No, whoever's chasing me, you turn into a pink bunny and make it non-threatening. You can ask to see your guardian angel or your guide and find out who they are. You can ask things before you go to sleep and wake up with your answers.
On the empirical level, that's what's called mutual dreaming is being researched in psychologists' office and so forth. And there is real progress. People can really get together and confirm later through a third party with double blind and so forth that, yes, I did raise my hand. Yes, I did say this to you. So it's really cool. And people learn to use their healing. People have done healings on themselves and others using, energetic energy while lucid dreaming and so forth. So I think we're on the cusp of a real explosion of knowledge and usefulness therapeutically of dreaming in different ways, especially lucid dreaming.
Other questions?
Just to follow up on Patricia's question, like with the current political climate that we're in, and are you hearing or people experiencing more dreams resulting from what they watched on the news or what they heard, or is that irrelevant to our dream world with our dream maker?
The particular people that I've worked with over the last 6 months are more involved in their personal spiritual journeys and don't seem to have dreams which resonate that much with the social aspect of what they're going through. But I'm sure you're right on a more general basis.
You're
Absolutely.
saying that would come more in the nightmare category.
Communal nightmare.
Yes, a communal nightmare.
Daymare.
Well, since we've all had a nice round of questions, maybe we should bring it to a close officially. Our panel will be here for a while. You can come up and chat with them. I wanted to say, too, each of them in different settings, do individual, I don't know if you call it counseling or just meeting with people to explore together or spiritual companionship, readings, whatever you like. So if you'd like information on how to get in touch with them, they will have it up here at their table along with other things that they've brought along. So we will officially close it. Remember to mark your calendar for the great programs we have coming up after the first of the year. And be sure and hang around, finish up the refreshments, and visit some with our panel, and have a wonderful holiday season. Godspeed.